Hello and welcome to Unabridged, the weekly podcast where teachers take on books. This is Sara. Join us for bookish episodes and a monthly book club pick.
This is Ashley. Find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Unabridged Pod, or go to our website, unabridgedpod.com, where the books we read are linked for purchase.
This is Jen. Check out our Teachers Pay Teachers store, our Patreon page, and our newsletter. Please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts to support us. You want opinions about books? We've got them.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 141. Today is our book club episode for our September book club pick. We are going to be talking about Chanel Miller's Know My Name. Before we get started, we wanted to remind you that we are constantly putting stuff out on Patreon, and our Patreon material is really growing, and we have some great extra episodes that we talk about book to movie adaptations. We do unabridged off topic, and there's just lots there. So definitely go take a look at that on www.patreon.com/unabridged pod. Unabridged pod. Sorry. I'm getting nods from Ashley and Jen. So go ahead and look at that. And now, before we start our discussion on Know My Name, we are going to do our bookish check-in. Jen, what are you reading?
I am almost done with Natasha Trethewey's Memorial Drive. Trethewey is a poet whose work, I don't read tons of poetry, but the poetry of hers I've read is gorgeous. And I got to hear her speak at the National Book Festival. She read some of her poetry aloud, and she talked about this memoir that she was writing about her mother's murder. And so that's the book I'm reading now. It just came out. It is gorgeous. It is really powerful. It is really heart-wrenching. So I'm not sure it was the best choice for this time, but I really wanted to read it because I admire her so much. Her mother. So Trethewey writes a lot about growing up with her mother and father. She is biracial. Her father is from Canada and is white, and her mother was from Alabama and is Black. And so she talks a lot about growing up and the experiences she had when she was young. And then her parents got divorced and her mother remarried, and it's her stepfather who murdered her mother. So it's very much about remembering her mom and trying to sort of recapture these memories of her. And then it accounts for what happened to her. So yeah, it's amazing, but wow, it's very, very sad. So
Jen, is that one written in prose or poetry?
It's prose.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know that she's done that before. I have not researched her exhaustively, but my sense is that this is one of the first prose pieces she's published. So it's really beautiful. Yeah. I think you would like it, but man, you have to be in the right headspace for it because it is, well, yeah, the topic alone tells you that it's going to be really sad. Yeah. So anyway, so that's Natasha Trethewey's Memorial Drive.
That sounds great, but also I don't think it's the right book for me at this moment.
Yeah.
Ashley, what are you reading?
So on the other end of the spectrum, this is a romantic comedy or I guess just romance. So this one I stumbled upon kind of by accident. I was procrastinating on a lot of other things and started an audiobook, and this is Alexis Halse's Boyfriend Material. This is one of the Libro FM books that was made available through their ALC program, which I love. And I started this the other night and it was just totally swept away. It's a really sweet story of Luke is the main character, and he is just stumbling. You know, he's having trouble finding his way, and he partially because his parents are both sort of washed up rock stars, and they were separated when he was young. But because of this very loose connection to fame, the paparazzi is always watching him. So even though I think that one thing that is captured right away in the book is this idea that it's easy to be negatively impacted by a little bit of fame instead of having any positive impacts. And so you definitely see this happening for Luke, that he doesn't have any great accolades happening for him because of this connection, but he does have to watch what he's doing all the time, and every mistake that he makes is put on display. And he is struggling with relationships. And so early on in the book, there's an incident with the paparazzi that prompts him to need to kind of clean up his public image. And because of that, his friends are trying to help him because he doesn't want to lose his job is basically what's at stake. And so his friends are trying to help him, and they decide that he needs to find somebody to be essentially a fake boyfriend for him so that he can look more stable. And so through his friends, he gets to they recommend someone who he already knows and has some pretty negative feelings toward, but that person, Oliver, goes into disagreement with him. And so I love it. I think it shows a lot about the vulnerability of people and how hard it is to find your way, both for yourself and also in a relationship, and how sometimes some vulnerability is necessary in order to get in order to connect to other people, but just how hard that can be. And so Luke is a really sweet character, and Oliver is in a lot of ways his polar opposite, and yet they are finding their way through this difficult time. And so I am absolutely loving it. I'm not very far in yet, but I already am entranced, and it has been a really nice change from a lot of what I've read lately. And so again, that's Alexis Hall's boyfriend material.
Oh, that sounds so good. I'm sad I didn't get that when we got the ALCs from Libro FM, and now I'm regretting that.
I didn't either, but
I was
it's
trying not
definitely
to
on
be
my list.
greedy. I was trying not to be greedy with that.
I've struggled with that too, and I'm glad that I did that one because I wasn't sure if I was going to listen to it or not. But I love it. I mean, it's just the kind of sweet intimacies of getting to know someone, and I just think a lot of it is really well drawn and captivating. So what about you, Sarah? What are you reading?
So if you follow me on Instagram, you know, I said that I've been reading so much heavy stuff. And I mean, it really does take a toll. Like, I know that's coming from a place of privilege, being, you know, not having lived through these things, but like experiencing these stories, like even Chanel's story that we're going to talk about today. I mean, it takes an emotional toll. So after I finished Know My Name, I was like, I'm reading something that is going to be just total kind of like mind candy. So what I chose is Kate Stayman-London's One to Watch. And oh my gosh, I am loving, I mean, from the first page, I loved it. And this book is about a plus size fashion blogger she has a blog called OMB because her name is B, and I just think that's so cute. And she is unlucky in love, but she's got this, I mean, she is super successful in her career. She has this huge support system in her family and friends. And she's just an awesome person, but she just is having some trouble with love. And she is a huge fan of this reality TV show called Main Squeeze. And so, you know, it seems very Bachelor-esque. And so, you know, I'm here for that. And it's just so good so far. I'm not super far in, but she and her best friend gather every week to watch Main Squeeze. And I don't know, I just love her. She's super cool. I'm envious of her fashion. And you know, it's like this kind of mixed media thing too. So you get like text messages and emails, and I don't know, it's just in her blog posts, and I just really am enjoying it, and it's moving really fast. So I'm super excited to see where it goes. And it's kind of like right book, right time for me. So that is Kate Stayman-London's One to Watch.
I can't wait to read that one.
Yeah, that sounds really good.
I remember seeing that on the pub day releases, and I've seen a lot about it on Instagram. It looks great.
Yeah, I really, really like it. All right, now we're going to get started with our discussion on Know My Name. Again, that is by Chanel Miller. It is a memoir, and I'm going to just read a quick summary before we get started. In 2015, Chanel Miller attended a party with her sister and a friend where she was sexually assaulted by Brock Turner, then a student at Stanford University. This crime and the subsequent trial gained national notoriety, as did the shades of gray surrounding laws concerning rape and consent in the U.S. In this memoir, Chanel, in her own words, tells her story of her assault, the aftermath, and the ways in which she will continue to move forward. Okay, so let's start with overall impressions. Ashley, what was your overall impression of this book?
Yeah, I felt like it was real. I think Chanel Miller does a great job of just showing how she helps the reader see how skewed our perception is in our country about rape and sexual assault cases. And I think she does that in a variety of ways, but the real impact for me is it opens up this window into people who might feel that these cases aren't that big of a deal, or that people should be coming forward, or that if we could simply bring about change if more people just said what happened to them. I think it eliminates a lot of those attitudes and makes it very difficult for people to continue to perpetuate those ideas. And I think that's really important, because if we can't convince people that it is not the victim's responsibility, that the victim can't just come forward and fix everything, that those things can open up a wider cultural shift that I think is really needed. So I feel like the thing that really resonated with me is how she's able to show that not only the incident itself, but all of the aftermath had a profound and lasting impact on her life, on the lives of her family members, and on the lives of her friends. And so I think that part is what is really the most impactful for me.
How about you, Jen? What were your overall impressions?
I agree. I think it's an important work. I think it's a powerful work, because understandably it can be really hard if someone is the victim for that person to speak out. And so I think it's amazing and brave that she was able to publish this book and to be so clear-eyed and so thorough in explaining, like you said, Ashley, how it impacted her and her family and friends. It was just like their lives were put on pause for so long. It was like a second victimhood, the way it worked in the criminal justice system. So I thought that was really powerful. I also think she did such a great job. It was almost like there's a checklist of like things people say about women who were raped. And she was able to go down through and show why each of those is not a reason for a woman to be raped. And I think the Brock Turner incident gained such notoriety because of the way people talked about him. And I thought when she addressed that, when she talked about everyone so focused on his lost potential and on what a good person he was, they brought his French teacher in to talk about what a good student she was. I just thought all of that was really well done in showing that multiple things can be true about someone at the same time, and that it's not just the rapist's lost potential that the media should be focusing on. I think she obviously her life has changed because of this incident. And so I think therefore she is able to just look back and just highlight so many things that are important for our society to consider. I just thought it was amazing. Oh, and the campus part, when she was talking about the way she was treated by the university where it happened.
Yeah.
That was something I had not heard anything about before. And that was toward the end of the book, but I felt like that was just eye-opening as well.
Yeah.
So sorry, that was not entirely coherent, but yeah, I think overall it is an important work. And I'm so glad that she was able to be brave enough to write it.
Yeah.
I think it's a real act of bravery. What about you, Sara?
I mean, I don't want to just say the things that you all said. So all of those things, I think to me, the impact of the duration of the trial, like getting to trial. And I think she just did a really good job of showing how, like Tiffany, her sister, how she was impacted. She's trying to finish up her schooling, and the trial keeps getting pushed back, and she's trying to rearrange everything. And I mean, I think that she did a really good job of showing the stress on all parties involved, not just the victim and the attacker, like just all the little things that go into trying to, get this justice. And Yeah, I mean, it was so frustrating. And and she basically had to put her life on hold. And I think she does a really good job of talking about the privileged way in which she was able to basically put her whole life on hold for years to get through this. And that people like some victims have no, I mean, they cannot do that. And then what is there, I don't know. I just think she does a good job of all of that, just showing the effects, showing how her life basically stopped, and, and creating that frustration in the reader for, trying to advocate for change in that process. So now we're going to just talk about what worked for us. I mean, I think we might have covered some of that in our overall impressions, but is there anything that you'd like to add about what worked for us? I do want to preface both what worked for us and what didn't work for us with memoirs. It is real. That is the one time that our little discussion outline sometimes is challenging, because memoirs are people's words and their life experience, and it's the story that they want to put out. So I will preface, I think that I speak for all three of us, and that maybe we can just talk about those things together and know that we respect the story. And we are not commenting on, whenever we do a memoir, anybody's right to tell their own story. I don't know if you all want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that part of what I was looking for a quote when you all were talking about her ability to tell her own story. And I think that something that's really striking in this is this idea. I mean, we have a section where we're going to share a quote, and this is not the one I wanted to share for that, but I do want to share this because I think it's relevant to what both of you said, where she says, she's talking about Brock versus herself, and she says, his talent precedes the tragedy. She was supposedly born in it. I did not come into existence when he harmed me. She found her voice. I had a voice. He stripped it, left me groping around blind for a bit, but I always had it. I just used it like I never had to use it before. I do not owe him my success, my becoming. He did not create me. The only credit Brock can take is for assaulting me, and he could not even admit to that. And I just wanted to share that in relationship to what you all said, because to me, that is the thing that works best in the book, is both that she highlights so well the whole process and how unbelievably brutal it is, in addition to surviving sexual assault, that the ongoing pain of that, but also this idea that the attitude that in some ways, because she spoke out, this somehow made her who she was. And I think that is a misrepresentation as well. So she had this strength inside herself. Yes, the experience is going to have an impact on her as a person, but it did not make her. He did not make her who she is. And I just really appreciated that too, her ability to show that when a woman is strong, it is not the assaulter who made her strong. And I think that that part in the book is really powerful as well. And that she provides that in a lot of ways. And going back to what you all said about the shades of gray of all people, and how, throughout the trial process, her blacking out is scrutinized, the clothes she's wearing are scrutinized. All of those things are analyzed by everyone in the courtroom. And she talks about having to be the right kind of victim and how you're supposed to look this certain way. And so, I think all of that just really spoke to the cultural attitudes that are brought to the table when people discuss sexual assault.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, Sara, what you were saying about the memoir, I think is valid, because in many ways, I think this memoir is a reclamation of her identity. And I think when she says, this is right at the beginning, however, I am not Brock Turner's victim. I am not his anything. I don't belong to him. I think she is reckoning with the fact that she has come to be known only through that lens, and that she is so much more. And so that resistance to saying, well, because he's a great swimmer, he couldn't have done this thing. She's like doing the reverse of that. Because she is his victim, she is still all of these other things. So yeah, I think it is an act in and of itself that her publishing this is why it makes it so hard to talk about all memoirs, but especially this one. The act of it being published and being out there is like her reclamation of her story. And I think that is amazing and powerful. And I think it started with her victim statement, but that was still under another name. And so I think being able to put this out there under her name, she says at the beginning, my name is Chanel, is just amazing. It really is. And yeah.
I think the way that she ties in the naming of like the name and the importance of a name and identity throughout the whole book is really powerful, and like and how we place labels on things. I think that is all really powerful. And I will say that when I started the book, I started it reading it because I had the physical copy, but I switched to audiobook because a lot of people when I posted it on Instagram said that the audio was so amazing and that Chanel reads it. And I will say that I feel like that was a good choice for me because hearing her say her words in her own voice is super powerful. And especially when she read the Emily Doe victim statement. And I mean, she delivered it. And I thought that was super powerful to hear that in her own words. So I think what worked for me, and it was a good choice for me to switch from the paper copy to the audiobook because it added a level of power to the words that I couldn't get as quickly off the page. So I think she does a really good job of describing a lot of really hard stuff. And she does not make it easy. She says all the things. And I think that is important as well.
Yeah. Yeah. When she talks about when she's testifying at her trial, and it just became so obvious that a trial is a game someone can win.
Yeah.
And it was really frustrating. And I'm not naive about the law. I understand that. But when you see her realizing that Turner's defense attorney is asking her questions in a certain way and in a certain order to be disorienting so that and it's, again, I've watched lots of movies about it. It's not shocking, but it's shocking in the way that she can feel it happening, and yet there's no control she can exert other than doing her best to share her experience and to tell her truth. But also then the way the people who hear it, the judge and the probation officer, are able to twist that truth to fit the narrative that they want.
Yeah.
It was just so frustrating. And that, there are a lot of things that are frustrating about it, but that was just really disheartening.
I thought the part where Tiffany's comment about I thought she was fine gets misconstrued, just really purposefully misconstrued, demonstrated that, because it's ridiculous outside of this like courtroom context. Is completely ridiculous to suggest that she said that as if to imply that she, knowing her so well, knew she was okay, and therefore it was somehow a consensual act. I mean, it's completely absurd. And yet they do that over and over again. And I think, just like you said, Jen, I mean, it's so apparent that it's a game. There's no way on earth. I mean, what she meant was, I feel guilt and sorrow that I could not read the situation better to stop this from happening to my sister. That's what she meant. And what they took instead was that she could then be in the right mind to make a consensual decision. And I think it's just that purposeful misrepresentation of what is being said that's ridiculous, but it's also the only ground that they had to stand on, because of course it is completely wrong. I mean, it's hard not to, like you said, Jen, it is just very frustrating for the reader, which I think Chanel does well, because it demonstrates to us how painful and slow the whole situation is.
Yeah.
It's such he's so clearly in the wrong.
Yeah. Well, and I'm going to read a quote. We've been doing pretty well with not reading a quote, but I do think, like, when I read that victim impact statement, and she gets to address the judge and address Brock, and something that she wrote, because of all the arguments that the defense attorney made, when she wrote this, I was like, I mean, it just seems so cut and dry to me, And so what she wrote is, according to him, the only reason we were on the ground was because I fell down. Note, if a girl falls down, help her get back up. If she's too drunk to even walk and falls down, do not mount her, hump her, take off her underwear, and insert your hand in her vagina. If a girl falls down, help her up. if she's wearing a cardigan over her dress, don't take it off so that you can touch her breasts. Maybe she is cold. Maybe that's why she wore the cardigan. And I mean, I'm just like, it is just seems so simple. And I mean, not simple in terms of cut and dry, and that
he's
she was
clearly
assaulted.
in the wrong.
All the arguments. And I'm like, I don't know. The victim impact statement for me was the most powerful thing in the book, because she basically was able to negate every single argument that both the judge and the defense attorney tried to argue in the trial itself. So I don't know. It's just so frustrating. And as a woman and a mother of a daughter, it is terrifying to me what the narrative is that surrounds this. What was she wearing? Had she had other sexual partners? Who cares? I mean, I think what the book did for me, and like the thing that worked the most for me, is to get me fired up about what kind of world my daughter is going to be going out into, and what do I need to advocate for to make it better, because, you know, it just seems archaic what happened in that book.
Yeah. And I have to say, as a mother of sons, there is so much to be angry about in the book. But one thing I appreciated is that it is a journey, and she goes into the depths of despair. And it's not like the ending is this super happy ending, but she comes to appreciate like the Swedes who stopped Brock Turner, and who she says the first thing they did was kneel down to make sure I was okay. And that's a different type of masculinity. And there are all of these people who, once they know her story, come to support her. So yes, there are ugly trolls online, but there are also people who her example is strength for them and gives them bravery. But yeah, I just kept thinking, like, how do we talk to our sons to make sure that they go into the world like the Swedes and not like Brock Turner, that they are there, and if they see something wrong, they help someone and they kneel down to make sure they're okay. They don't take advantage of someone because they feel like they can get away with it, which is clearly the way he was going around kissing all the girls at the party, or trying to kiss them, forcing kisses on them at multiple parties. And so it was just, the pattern of his behavior was so disturbing. And yet that was not the pattern of his behavior that came to the forefront of the trial. It was, oh, he swims really fast. Oh, he was great in French class. Oh, he was a really good boyfriend in high school. Anyway, sorry, I got off the topic of, I just think there are some really good people in the book as well. And so I think there were times that she couldn't see that, because all that she could see were the people who were trying to tear her down. So I was glad by the end that she was able to recognize those people as well.
Yeah. And I think it's also like going back to the naming and the power of her name and being associated with the acts, because a lot of, that basically her sister says that to her about all that it took to shut them all down, is hearing your voice. And I think that's the thing, is that anonymity may be for the protection of the victim, but it also makes it a lot easier for people to then blame the victim. So it's this perpetual situation of, you do want to protect someone's privacy, and yet by doing that, you are silencing them, which makes it easier for people to judge them. And it goes back to the idea that, like, we can't talk about assault in our country. I mean, there's so many things that we can't discuss in our country, and by not discussing them, we are making things worse for the victims.
Okay, so here's our favorite part. We get to talk about a quote. We did sneak in a few before this section, but we're each going to talk about a quote that really stood out to us. Ashley, do you want to go first?
Sure. And I just want to say that I feel like we discussed, that it is the power of the quotes within the book that really resonates. And so there are so many that I'd like to share, because I think that was the thing that had the most impact on me, was these like isolated statements that really brought about a new way of considering the situation. But the one I wanted to choose is where she is just talking about sexual assault as opposed to other crimes. And she says, "There's no such thing as a good stabbing or a bad stabbing, consensual murder or non-consensual murder. In this crime, pain could be disguised and confused as pleasure. I had been to the hospital, a place where people go when their bodies are sick or wounded. But I pulled my sleeves over my bruises, afraid that I would not receive the same comforts as an injured person. In rape cases, it's strange to me when people say, well, why didn't you fight him? If you woke up to a robber in your home, saw him taking your stuff, people wouldn't ask, well, why didn't you fight him? Why didn't you tell him no? He's already violating an unspoken rule. Why would he suddenly decide to adhere to reason? What would give you reason to think he'd stop if you told him to? And in this case, with my being unconscious, why were there still so many questions? And that's on page 49. So like right early on in the book, I think she just really establishes that. But I also think that comparing it to other crimes shows the absurdity of the way that we treat victims in sexual assault. I mean, that is exactly it. It is ridiculous to continue to ask a victim why they did or didn't do, wear, drink, or any other part of why they didn't do something when it is the fault of the assaulter.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I just think it's such a powerful quote because, and like I said, I think she does this a lot of times because, again, I just think it all has to do with these power dynamics and this continual idea that somehow it is incumbent upon the victim to keep the situation from happening. So,
yeah. Jen, what's your quote?
So mine is also from early in the book, and I had a really hard time choosing just one because I was highlighting stuff on almost every page, but this one starts, I didn't know that money could make the cell doors swing open. I didn't know that if a woman was drunk when the violence occurred, she wouldn't be taken seriously. I didn't know that if he was drunk when the violence occurred, people would offer him sympathy. I didn't know that my loss of memory would become his opportunity. I didn't know that being a victim was synonymous with not being believed. Sitting in the driveway, I didn't know this little yes would reopen my body, would rub the cuts raw, would pry my legs open for the public. And that little yes, just to give it context, is when she agrees to testify to prosecute that she does want to press charges. But yeah, the privilege in the book associated with Brock Turner and the double standards, I just found to be absolutely infuriating. And I was so angry with his family throughout the book and the way that they just treated her. They didn't even treat her, but they just acted as if she was not there, as if there was just no one in the courtroom and it was all about their son. And for him, it was all about himself. And that I didn't know that my loss of memory would become his opportunity. The way they're able to use that and reshape, manipulate his statement to suddenly have this clear-eyed memory, and that she just says yes, 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 yes over and over, that's all she says, because as she says, like, that's how anyone talks in real life. All of that is just laid out so clearly in the beginning. And then I feel like she takes the rest of the book just to address each of those issues throughout.
Well, I mean, I think she makes a really good point in the book about if Brock would have been a person of color, or if Brock would have been from a lower socioeconomic status, would the outcome have been the same? And I mean, she makes a very good argument that it would not have been the same. And I mean, the fact that he was able to pay for a high-priced defense lawyer, and that they were able to pay a blackout expert to come in and testify. I mean, at parts of the book, it gave me the same feeling I had when we read Just Mercy by Bryan, because, you know, it's just this. I mean, it's just the absurdity of the legal system protecting people who perpetuate this incorrect narrative, and like people from privilege who are able to have rules that don't apply to them, or people who don't come from privilege and having everything apply, like the law applied to them. It is infuriating. I'm going to need a fan.
Recently, somebody shared an image of, it was like outside of a coffee shop that said, we've now been in quarantine longer than Brock Turner was in prison. And I was reading this as I saw that image, and it is absolutely striking to think about how little consequence there was when he was found guilty. So, you know, we didn't get into all that, and we don't have to get into the details here, but you know, there's a moment of triumph when she's like, oh, he's guilty on all charges. And then
for 3 felonies,
right.
3 felonies.
And then it amounts to virtually nothing. And it all goes back to privilege and money and power. And it is unbelievable.
Yeah. Absolutely. And when there's a point at which I thought, oh, this is the end of the story. And then she continues and she talks about what happens with the judge who gave him such a ridiculously low sentence, and that he is voted out of office because these people are coming to defend her. But I thought it was such an empowering moment for her to think that her story could result in this man losing power. And yet it doesn't do a thing to change what happened with Brock Turner himself.
Right. Sarah, what about you? What was your quote?
So my quote is toward the end of the book, and it is really short, but wow, to me, it is so impactful. And what she says is, my pain was never more valuable than his potential.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that was the whole thing. Like, people were constantly talking about his future and talking about, oh, what he was losing. And nobody ever thought about how Chanel was feeling, or what this was doing to Chanel's life. They were only talking about what was being taken away from Brock that never actually hadn't even occurred. And I just think, I think that is such a powerful, powerful quote.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Whew. Guys, I'm fired up.
I know.
But okay, we're going to press on. We are now going to talk about our pairings for this book. And Jen, do you want to start off with your pairing?
Sure. So mine is, I will say this is pretty on the nose, but Jon Krakauer is an auto-buy author for me. And Chanel Miller actually mentions him in her acknowledgments. And I think that is a testament to the power of this book that I'm recommending, which is Missoula, Rape and the Justice System in a College Town. I read this shortly after it came out because, again, auto-buy author, I had it on pre-order. And so it's been a little while. So I was flipping through it this morning before we recorded. And I think what was coming back to me very quickly. So Krakauer approaches everything with lots of numbers and lots of data. And he is trying to show the prevalence of rapes in the United States, and particularly in college towns, which definitely hit home because of Chanel's story. But he has this balance of facts and trying to show that it is a problem. And Chanel Miller has that moment where she's realizing where her rape was announced, where that crime was announced, and that she figured that there had been so many mentioned before she saw it that she had never noticed. And it's almost this hidden crime, again, that we don't talk about. So what Krakauer does is he looks at the stories of several women in Missoula who were raped. They're very different circumstances. The one that opens is this woman who was raped by the boy that she considers to have been her best friend since childhood. He got drunk. He raped her. And the police officer comes to her house, and her dad doesn't know that it's happened. And the police officer is saying, "We've arrested Bo," is the guy's name. "We've arrested Bo." And the dad has no idea it's happening. So there are all of these parallels to Chanel's story, and thinking about when she told her parents and how she wanted to control that narrative. And yeah, anyway, so Krakauer through the book just explores the women's experience when they report it, when they go to the police, the way the police respond, which in some cases is horrifying, the way that the college deals with it or doesn't deal with it, the fact that there's one man who is expelled, and then there's a secret meeting and they let him back in. It's just, so he is just looking at it and trying to examine this microcosm of what happens across the country. So if you want a look at sort of a broader look at the horrifying way that we deal with rape in the country, I think it's not an easy read. Again, I don't think anything about this topic is, but I think it's another important read to think about the plight of these victims. So that, again, is Jon Krakauer's Missoula, Rape and the Justice System in a College Town.
I've been wanting to read that for a long time, and now that I've read Chanel's book, I would really like to read that.
Yeah. Well, you are welcome to borrow it. I haven't.
Yay. I always like to hear that.
So weird though anyway, it's important to read books like this even when they are really painful. So
yes. Ashley, what is your pairing?
I wanted to share Laurie Halse Anderson's Shout, which we have all read and discussed when we did an episode about her. And we'll link to that in the show notes. We saw her and Jason Reynolds speak in Charlottesville at the Festival of the Book, and they talked a lot about consent and about hard topics and working through them with kids and with teens. And so that I think really enriched my reading of this. But this is her memoir. It is written in verse, which is different than her other works, but she wrote this one in 2019. And when she wrote it, a lot of it was because she wrote Speak. So Speak was an iconic text that came out 21 years ago now. And that book, Speak, opened the door in a lot of ways to discussion with, it was a young adult book that included a sexual assault incident in it. And it was the main character didn't tell anyone, and then it's her coming to find her voice and tell her story. And so in a lot of ways, that book opened up a conversation with teens about consent, about speaking up, about sexual assault happening. And yet Laurie Halse Anderson in Shout is commenting on how here we are all this time later, and so little has changed in that conversation. And so it's really powerful. It is raw. It's beautifully written. And I just think that it is a really impactful book, and that it shows how she is such a heroic person. I mean, I just really admire her as a person. I admire her as a writer, and I admire her ability to take on hard topics. And yet you still can see how hard it was for her to tell her own experience. And I think that is really powerful because, again, I think in this whole idea of all the things that we criticize victims for, that a big criticism is that more people should speak up. And so a lot of the Me Too movement is about this ability to come forward and to speak to the fact that, yes, as a woman, I've had these experiences. And so I think she does that, but I also appreciated how it showed how hard it is for her, because again, for anyone who has followed her, she is very outspoken, she's very courageous, and she certainly knows herself and knows how to advocate. And yet you can see in that book how hard it was, how hard that journey has been for her to get there, and how she is continuing to work through that as a person. And so I think all that is really powerful, and also is really comforting to people who are trying to find a way to speak for themselves in a more effective way. So again, that's Laurie Halse Anderson's Shout. And I this is not a pairing, but I just wanted to mention, with everything that you said about Missoula, Jen, that Kiese Laymon's Heavy that I talked about not long ago in our nonfiction episode, I wanted to mention because there is an incident with when he is a college professor, there's an incident with a very privileged white boy on the campus who has cocaine. And it is a whole situation where the campus handles it instead of the police. And essentially, the kid says that he was pressured by a dark-skinned man in a club to take the cocaine. And so he completely gets off with having done nothing, when it's clear that he is a dealer on the campus and that he has this whole network. And I just wanted to mention that I think that while it is different for sure from what we're talking about as far as sexual assault, it does address a lot about campus life and how those dynamics work in our country. And so I just wanted to mention that I think that is another situation that just portrays how people can be protected from having anything incriminating happen to them by a campus. So that's an aside, but I did want to mention that reminded me so much, Jen, when you were saying some of those incidents. So Sarah, what about you? What's your pick?
So along those same lines, Ashley, my pairing is not a book about sexual assault. So my pick is Jason Reynolds and Brendan Kiely's All-American Boys. The reason that I think this makes a good pairing for Know My Name is that Rashad, one of the main characters in the book. So this book is about Rashad and Quinn, and it is told in alternating perspectives. I think I just talked about this book when we interviewed Farah Roshan.
Mhm.
So-
Yeah, I think it was your Bookish Check-in.
Yes. So I'm like, this is seeming familiar. But anyway, this book is about Quinn and Rashad. It's told in alternating perspectives. And basically, Rashad is at a corner store. He is buying something, or he is looking for chips, and he is tripped. He falls down, and basically what transpires is this horrible act of police brutality. Rashad is black, and Quinn, who is white, happens to be there and witnesses it. And it's just about both of their journeys through this horrible act of violence. So what really made me think of All American Boys when I was reading Chanel's story is the fact that when Rashad is attacked, even his father questions, what were you wearing? Were your pants sagging? What were you, how were you acting? And all of this stuff. And again, like when I was reading Chanel's story, I mean, she was asked, how drunk were you? How many sexual partners have you had? What were you wearing? And I'm like, none of that matters. In both of these cases, these horrendous crimes, this horrendous violence has happened, and it does not matter what anybody's wearing. It does not matter how they were acting. That is irrelevant. And so I guess, and it gave me that same feeling when I was reading Rashad's story in All American Boys when I read Chanel's account of all those questions about what she was wearing and all of that. So I think that while they are different stories, I think that violence against women in this country, so assault and the violence against people of color and Black people in particular, I think there are some similarities in the way that those stories go. And I think it is terrible. I think it is infuriating. And I feel I get those same feelings having read Chanel Miller's book and reading All American Boys. So that's why my pairing is All American Boys. And that is by, again, Jason Reynolds and Brendan Kiely.
It's a great pairing. Yeah. I think that connection it's an undoubtable connection. I think it's one we have to think about.
And it kind of goes to what I said about Just Mercy too.
Yeah.
I mean, by Bryan Stevenson, it's all of those things that it just seems like there is it just seems nonsensical, I guess, that these things are continuing to happen and the same results are continuing to happen when it is very clear that it should be going a different way.
Right.
So,
and then if it can't go a different way, then the system has to change.
Yeah.
If it's continuing to happen when it's so clear to everyone, then the system itself has got to change and the culture has to change around it. So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
So I don't know that there's a great way to transition from that topic to our Give Me One, but that's the way our episodes go. So I think that was a good discussion, and I think that that Know My Name is definitely is well worth a read, and because it definitely shines light on some things that we have to work on as a country. So our Give Me One topic today is an instrument you wish you could play, or that if you could play an instrument, which would you choose? Ashley, do you want to start us off?
Sure. So I don't know. We haven't talked much about music on here. So I played a lot of things growing up and was very involved in music. And so one that I would choose is cello, and really any of the stringed instruments. So I predominantly played flute and piano, but I also played a little bit of brass and have a little bit of experience in other things, but I do not violin or cello. I don't know anything about those. And so I would be very interested to learn that.
Jen, how about you?
Yeah. So the only thing I play is the flute. And
it's You Play Living on a Prayer.
That's right. You remember. Yes. And I love that experience, and I love being part of the band. I will say it's not much of a solo instrument, and it's not very cool. And so I think if my pick would be guitar, because I just feel like it's something you can work on your own. it's really cool. Playing Living on a Prayer on guitar would be much cooler than playing it on your flute. I mean, right? And not that I've ever been cool, nor do I have any hope to be cool, but I love guitar. I love the way it sounds, and I love the songs that you can play on a guitar without it being a little bit of a mismatch.
Well, friend, if you ever want to pursue that, we have a wide range of instruments in our house, and I'm sure we have a guitar you could borrow. So. What about you, Sara? What's your choice?
Well, unlike both of you, I have no musical ability whatsoever. I did for a short time before I even was in my teens, probably like when I was 9 or 10, I thought I wanted to play the guitar. So I took guitar lessons for a season. I could never read the sheet music, so I would have to go through and write all the chords down so I would know if like it was an A or a B or whatever. Also, I did not like the practicing part. I wanted an electric guitar, and I wanted to play like Eddie Van Halen immediately. And so playing like the old gray Mayer sheet, what she used to be, was not in my goals for that. So that fell by the wayside. And then when I got to middle school, I was like, oh, I think I'll play the sax in the band. So I did get that. And then that did not go well either, because again, I could not read the sheet music. And so I just pretended to play every class and also in our recital. So I never blew in the horn. I just pressed the buttons.
I have to tell you, I'm a little
sorry, Mr. Connor, my band teacher.
You're what? I believe they didn't teach you to read sheet music.
Huh?
Reading sheet music should have come first. That's really horrifying.
And I'm a little scandalized also. Anyway.
That's really funny.
Well, I didn't last very long. I went to I did one recital, and then I quit and joined chorus, which again, no singing ability. So that is my musical saga. However, if I could be musical and play an instrument, it would definitely be the guitar or the piano. I like that whole singer-songwriter vibe, and I think that those are the instruments that really play well into those. So if I could, that would be, but I don't think that will ever happen because no musical ability whatsoever. All right. So I think that we will end there with all my musical confessions and a scandalized Ashley. We want to thank you. We want to thank you for listening today. And we are really interested in what you think about Know My Name by Chanel Miller. Please make sure that you check out our Instagram posts, Facebook posts, all the posts that we have that we are totally willing to discuss with you and get to know what you think about this book. Thanks for listening. Do you have comments or opinions about what you heard today? We'd love to hear them.
You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Unabridged Pod, or on the web at unabridgedpod.com for a list of ways to support us.
We'd like to thank Jared Featherstone, who composed our theme music, Strings of Light, and Katie Amy of Amy Photography, our podcast photographer. Thanks for listening to Unabridged.